Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I am honored to be here again in my capacity as the UN Special Rapporteur on the sale, sexual exploitation, and sexual abuse of children. At the outset, I would like to thank member states, UN agencies, civil society organizations, national human rights institutions, young people, children, and all other stakeholders who have engaged with me over the past year. I would also like to thank countries who have accepted my request for visits, as well as those who have dedicated their time to share their views and lived experiences with me. I would like to express my gratitude for the cooperation extended to me by the government of Germany during my visit in the last quarter of 2024. I will present the report of said visit in March 2026. As I prepare for this year's undertaking, I would like to thank the government of United Arab Emirates for the invitation extended to me, and I look forward to my country visit in April this year. I wish to also thank all stakeholders, including Montenegro, who submitted inputs to the follow-up exercise of my country visits between 2021 and 2022 to Mauritius, Montenegro, and the Philippines. And to all other stakeholders who responded to my call for input, thank you for your valuable contributions, which helped enrich the present thematic report on the sexual abuse of children in peacekeeping and humanitarian contexts. This thematic report details the manifestation of sexual abuse of children in peacekeeping and humanitarian contexts and identifies the gaps in the efforts of the United Nations and its partners in combating this problem and provides concrete recommendations to bridge these gaps by integrating a child rights-based approach and ensuring accountability of perpetrators. The report is a product of contributions received from a call for inputs, issued as well as literature reviews relevant to this topic and the outcome of meetings that were held with various stakeholders. Excellencies, the United Nations often operates in complex field settings marked by conflicts, violence, insecurity, and humanitarian emergencies. Hundreds of thousands of dedicated staff work tirelessly to ease the suffering of people they serve. In such contexts, UN peacekeeping and humanitarian operations play a critical role in helping people, states, emerge from crisis with a hope for a better future. However, since the early 1990s, the United Nations has been grappling with widespread allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse, including against children, perpetrated by UN staff and related personnel, such as personnel of UN peacekeeping operations, UN agencies, implementing partners of UN agencies, and non-UN international forces authorized under the United Nations Security Council mandates. In response to these allegations over the past decades, the United Nations systems has deployed invaluable insights and dedicated a lot of resources to combating the sexual exploitation and sexual abuse, including in peacekeeping and humanitarian contexts. It has taken a zero-tolerance approach to sexual abuse and exploitation. It has also placed victims' rights and dignity at the center of its responses, including through the appointment of a victims' rights advocate, and created a trust fund to support victims of sexual abuse and exploitation, as well as taking a systems-wide coordination and cooperation approach to responding to this problem. Yet, despite this significant progress made, the persistent allegations of sexual abuse of children in peacekeeping and humanitarian contexts have been a cause for concern. In 2023 alone, more than 200 allegations of sexual abuse of children were recorded. This number, while alarming, may not capture the real gravity of the problem. The absence of child rights-based approach in responding to this problem and the elusive accountability process are some of the gaps that exist in the response to sexual abuse of children in peacekeeping and humanitarian contexts. Madam President, this report therefore seeks to not only shine a light on this problem, but also provide concrete recommendations to integrate a child rights approach in the response to sexual abuse of children in peacekeeping and humanitarian context, as well as fight impunity of perpetrators, because it is a fundamental betrayal of trust when the very people who were deployed to support and ease the suffering of communities experiencing conflict and humanitarian crisis end up causing harm. And that betrayal is compounded when the international community fails to hold the perpetrators accountable and do more to care for child victims of sexual abuse and children born from those sexual abuses. We are all stakeholders in ensuring the safety of children and have an important responsibility to undertake renewed efforts to ensure proper mechanisms are put in place for preventing and responding to sexual abuse of children effectively and justly. I have provided several examples of good practices and pathways to responding to the sexual abuse of children in peacekeeping and humanitarian contexts, and this includes strengthening child safeguarding in peacekeeping and humanitarian contexts with due coordination and oversight, strengthening preventive measures that are grounding in community-based approaches to foster local ownership of child safeguarding efforts, putting in place child-friendly reporting mechanisms and early warning systems, and putting the needs and rights of child victims at the center of every intervention. One of the most important ways to prevent future instances of sexual abuse of children by peacekeepers and humanitarian workers is by holding perpetrators accountable for their crimes. The UN's zero tolerance policy will only become a reality when all United Nations and affiliated personnel see that such crimes will be met with criminal prosecution without exception. However, the intersection of jurisdictional issues, different legal systems, international law, immunity, lack of clarity, capacity, and political will render the pursuit of accountability extremely complex and difficult. A serious effort is therefore needed to address this shortcoming, and this includes the establishment of an independent special court mechanism that would investigate and prosecute the sexual abuse offenses committed by United Nations civilian and affiliated personnel and military personnel where their countries are unable or unwilling to do so. To actualize this option, I recommended that troop contributing countries agree to the amendment of the Model State of Forces Agreement to provide that troop contributing countries hold primary but not exclusive jurisdiction with respect to alleged crimes committed by their forces in the mission area. This would go a long way towards reducing impunity for sexual abuses committed by their military personnel against children. Finally, Madam President, my report also includes recommendations to member states of the United Nations to make more contributions to the Trust Fund in support of victims of sexual abuse and exploitation in order to provide comprehensive assistance tailored to the needs of child victims and children that are born as a result of those child sexual abuses. I also recommended that donors integrate due diligence requirement for child safeguarding policies and procedures into funding agreements with relevant peacekeeping missions and humanitarian operations, including on how to prevent and respond to sexual abuse of children. Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I would now like to introduce to you some of the main conclusions and recommendations gathered following my country visit to Australia from the 30th of October to the 10th of November 2023. I wish to first thank the Government of Australia for its availability and spirit of constructive dialogue and cooperation presented before, during, and after my visit. Australia has devoted much attention and resources to improve policy, legal, and institutional framework for adequate prevention and protection of children and young people from violence and sexual exploitation. The Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, the National Office of Child Safety, the E-Safety Commissioner and E-Safety Youth Council, the National Children's Commissioner and the Children's Commissioners and Guardians across all states and territories are a clear indication of the efforts being made to respond to the scourge of sexual exploitation and sexual abuse of children, as well as advocate for the rights and interests of young people, draw attention to and address the human rights challenges facing children, especially those vulnerable to human rights violations. Despite the positive developments, progress is limited by several factors such as the lack of federal law or harmonized laws between states and territories on the sale, sexual exploitation, and sexual abuse of children, in line with the Convention on the Rights of the Child and its optional protocol on the sale of children, child prostitution, and child pornography. In addition, the lack of comprehensive and disaggregated data at the national level on the different forms of sexual abuse and exploitation of children hinders ongoing efforts to address and respond to the root causes and risk posed by such offenses, as well as the design and implementation of adequate policies and measures to address them. There is a need for regular capacity enhancement for high-level stakeholders such as child commissioners and guardians, children's commissioners and guardians, as well as child frontline workers, in order to enable them undertake their monitoring and response roles more effectively. Raising awareness about and incorporating a gender dimension on the subject of sexual abuse, sale, and sexual exploitation of children is imperative for professionals and officials who work with or come in contact with children. Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the foregoing report is presented in the spirit of constructive engagement and dialogue. With the productive experiences garnered as shared from my visit to Australia, may I take this opportunity to encourage member states to respond positively to my request to country visits, as these visits form a crucial pillar in enriching my mandate and enhancing continuous dialogue and cooperation with states. I hope to continue the positive engagements with more states in the forthcoming days. I thank you all for your kind attention, and I look forward to a very interactive dialogue with you. Thank you.